Well, I've got some important breaking news from like a week or two ago. Dr. Oz is a puppy killer. Dr. Mehmet Oz, a shambling golem formed from piles of $100 bills that Oprah found in her couch cushions, was already not my favorite person, considering that he got rich selling snake oil on television. He's in favor of more people dying of COVID, and he's now a carpet-bagging Republican U.S. Senate candidate bravely crossing the Delaware to take away Pennsylvanians' right to get an abortion. And as a normal human being, I love non-human animals more than other human beings in general. So I was actually driven to even greater levels of loathing upon hearing the news that Dr. Oz was involved in apparently mass puppy murder. I mean, if you just tell me Dr. Oz killed some puppies, first of all, I'm not going to be surprised. And second of all, I don't need to hear any more context. I'm good. Say no more. He's a puppy killer. Yeah, we all hate him. Great. But then I did see the context and I was filled with annoyance because the context makes things more complicated. Dr. Oz's scientific experiments killed over 300 dogs, entire litter of puppies, reported Jezebel last week. Oh, right. I forgot that he's like a scientist. And we've seen this kind of accusation before, and it's not always the slam dunk criticism you might think it is. Like, yes, I love animals. I love dogs. I love puppies. And I will say that sometimes, unfortunately, scientists have to kill dogs. And yes, sometimes it's for a good reason. I talked about this earlier this year in relation to another person I hate, Elon Musk. Musk's brain implant startup Neuralink was accused of killing monkeys to test devices that could one day help paralyzed people regain the use of their limbs, among a bunch of other potential uses. And in my opinion, in theory, that is an end goal that is probably worth sacrificing non-human animals. However, the documents released by Neuralink's partner, UC Davis, revealed that the primates were likely abused in ways that were not required by the research. Basically, they were treated very cruelly. So it's important that before any research is conducted on living beings, researchers and oversight committees spend a significant amount of time and energy determining whether the end goal will be worth it and how they can conduct that research with as little negative impact on the animal as possible. Doing that doesn't only minimize harm to those individual animals, but it also goes a long way towards protecting the mere concepts of animal research, because every time horrible conditions are revealed in a laboratory, it makes the public that much more skeptical of those labs that might be out there doing good work. In fact, Scientists Kill Puppies was a headline used just last year by the right-wing propaganda machine to turn the public against Dr. Anthony Fauci. In October of 2021, a group called White Coat Waste Project published an expose that even came ready-made with its own hashtag, Beaglegate. While they have no examples of Fauci himself overseeing any animal experiments, they do claim that the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which Fauci is the director of, gave funding to studies that then experimented on animals in ways that they describe as cruel and unnecessary. The Institute, which is part of the National Institutes of Health, has an annual budget of about $6 billion, so it's safe to say that they fund quite a number of studies. However, as their director, the buck would stop with Fauci if the Institute had shown particular negligence in spending even a tiny fraction of their budget funding studies that they should have known would be unethical. The White Coat Waste Project specifically calls out 3 unethical studies that they say NIAID funded. One of them, a study in Tunisia in which dogs were locked in cages with sandflies, was not actually funded by NIAID, as confirmed by the Institute and the journal where the study was published. The other two studies were funded by NIAID and did involve dogs, but White Coat Waste Project leaves out pertinent details. For instance, one was a University of Georgia study that they describe as healthy beagles given an experimental drug and then intentionally infested with flies that carry a disease-causing parasite that affects humans. They fail to mention that the parasite in question, lymphatic filariasis, affects tens of millions of people each year with painful and profoundly disfiguring symptoms. And the best-known prevention currently is preventative chemotherapy, which hundreds of millions of people have to go through each year. A safe and effective vaccine would be literally life-changing to people in these areas where they're most at risk. Oh, also, this affects dogs, which is why this research was done on dogs, and the results might contribute to a vaccine for dogs. The group described another study as cruel and unnecessary drug toxicity tests on dogs and other animals that cost taxpayers $1.68 million, while failing to mention that the drug in question was a cutting-edge antiretroviral to treat HIV/AIDS, and the FDA requires that those types of drugs be tested on non-rodent animals in pursuit of approval, with dogs being the recommended animal for that particular drug. It was also required that the dogs be euthanized after the study so that the researchers could be sure the drugs didn't cause any damage to internal organs. Were these studies worth it? That's left up to the individual, honestly. For some people, no animal's life is worth less than any number of human lives. But for people living with or dying from diseases like HIV and lymphatic filariasis, the answer may be, yeah, absolutely it's worth it. Did the animals they used in these studies suffer more than strictly necessary? I can't answer that. Unfortunately, I have to rely upon the word of the researchers involved, the universities and institutions overseeing them, and the government and nonprofit agencies like the Association for Assessment and Accreditation of Laboratory Animal Care that make sure that these studies adhere to the laws we have established on animal welfare. I say unfortunately because we know that we cannot always trust this system. This is the same system that allowed Elon Musk's startup to get away with applying crazy glue to the exposed neurons of monkeys, essentially melting their brains. And it's the same system where Dr. Oz is now under fire for killing puppies. On that note, let's go over the facts in this case. By the way, you will not find the White Coat Waste Project discussing anything about these accusations as of this recording. It seems as though they only care about allegations of animal abuse when those allegations are directed towards someone liberal. I don't know. But anyway, unlike Dr. Fauci, who ran a billion-dollar institute that gave funding to researchers who eventually used dogs in their research, Dr. Oz was actually the principal investigator at Columbia University's Institute of Comparative Medicine, where he is listed basically as an author on at least 75 studies. So he's not just funding the studies. The studies weren't just done at his institute. His name is actually on the research papers. According to Jezebel, who dropped this expose, his team conducted experiments on at least 1,027 live animal subjects that included dogs, pigs, calves, rabbits, and small rodents. 34 of these experiments resulted in the deaths of at least 329 dogs, while 2 of his experiments killed 31 pigs, and 38 experiments killed 661 rabbits and rodents. As a lead, that's honestly not shocking or upsetting to me. That's just research, especially medical research, in which scientists are required to use and then euthanize animals to absolutely 100% ensure safety and efficacy in humans. And much as Fauci didn't euthanize dogs for the research his institute funded, as principal investigator, Oz most likely had little input over day-to-day operations in his labs. But as Fauci is ultimately responsible for making sure his institute isn't funding unethical research, Oz was ultimately responsible for making sure that his direct reports working on studies that his name was on weren't, say, euthanizing puppies with expired drugs and then throwing them in a dumpster with their still living litter mates, which, yeah, that's one allegation from a postdoctoral veterinary fellow at Columbia. She alleged that 20 years ago. Catherine Del Orto said she witnessed rampant abuse of research dogs in Oz's labs at Columbia to the point that she says she raised the issue internally with Columbia and then also with the USDA. And she says neither of them did anything. So in 2002, she turned to PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, the unfortunately batshit animal rights group who, if nothing else, are very good at getting publicity. They were annoying enough that in 2004, Columbia conducted an internal investigation, and then they and the USDA agreed to settle out of court for $2,000 because they did find evidence for some of Del Orto's claims, such as pups whelped from a dog being used in a research study were euthanized with outdated euthanasia solution. Drug use logs indicate the pups were not properly sedated at the time, as claimed by the person administering euthanasia. Oz, for his part, claims that he had no idea that there were any ethical issues in his labs until after the experiments were already over, which is kind of understandable as he was a working surgeon at the time who was also, it seems, desperately trying to get as famous as possible. So who has time left over to make sure some dogs are doing okay? Which is just one of the many reasons why he probably should not have been director of a major university research facility. Columbia actually stuck by him through these animal abuse allegations, but I guess they finally had enough as of May of this year when they finally cut ties with him after real scientists have been asking them for years what they're doing, giving him any legitimacy. So, did Dr. Oz personally murder puppies while cackling and singing about his new slippers? No. Were research animals euthanized under what was supposed to be his watch at Columbia? Absolutely. Were those animals abused or killed unnecessarily? I don't know. I find Del Orto's accusations to be quite credible, seeing as she appears to have taken copious notes during her time at Columbia, and that the university themselves did find evidence for some of her claims. And finally, was Dr. Oz responsible for any ethics violations? Absolutely, yes. Running an institute isn't just about the fame and the money, but also about that responsibility. And even if he never stepped foot in his own laboratory, any ethics violations that may have occurred there are still his problem to deal with. That said, there are bigger problems with Dr. Oz that we already know to be 100% true because he's said them out loud. He's downplayed COVID-19. He wanted to open businesses and schools before mitigation efforts could be put into place. He has said that he opposes abortion, except in extreme circumstances. He's made a career selling snake oil to credulous Americans, and there's absolutely no reason to expect him to stop once he's elected to the Senate. So please vote in this election. If you are in Pennsylvania, particularly, please do us all a favor. Send Dr. Oz back to one of his mansions in New Jersey.